Welcome to the SketchUp for Schools lesson. This is Design Your Dream Home Part 1, Model a 2D Floor Plan. In this series, you'll learn how to model this 2D floor plan, extrude it and build it up into 3D. You'll print it out and fold it back together as a physical model. Before you get started with this lesson, be sure to check out the Getting Started series, become more familiar with the basic navigation and drawing tools, as well as the user interface of SketchUp. Otherwise, let's get started. When you launch this lesson, you'll start with the template here. This is Catherine, and this model that we're using uses the imperial drawing system. That means we'll be drawing using feet and inches. That is different from the metric system, which would use something like millimeters or meters. In addition to knowing the units that we're drawing in, we also want to make sure we're using our preferred input method. You can click down here and you can choose whether to select a mouse or trackpad based off of your preference. For me, I always like using SketchUp with a mouse if I have one. Otherwise, if you have just a laptop and trackpad, that is fine too. I'll click mouse and then click on the X to close it. Now that we're ready to draw, when starting a floor plan, it's best to begin drawing with basic rectangles. And we'll start at this origin point right here. We'll start the model by creating the basic living space first, using a series of rectangles to represent the rooms. First, click on the rectangle tool located right here, and then you can also click it again up at the top here. With the rectangle tool active, click and release starting at the origin point here. Move your cursor up and to the right, and then let go of the trackpad or of your mouse. Type in 16 apostrophe, comma, 30 apostrophe, and press return. This will create a 16-foot wide room that is 30 feet tall. We're in perspective now and we're seeing the model in this 3D view. And it's actually best when drawing floor plans to be looking from above in a top view. Over on the right, click on the Scenes Manager and then click on the top view icon located right here. That will bring us into a top view. It may bring us in a little too close. So just take your cursor and scroll down with the mouse or with your trackpad. You can scroll as well, similar to how you would scroll a web page to zoom in and out. You can always use the navigation tools over here as well, in which I'll click on the pan tool and I'll just drag the model over so that we can see more of the space. So this vertical rectangle is going to be the main living area of the space. And then to the right, we'll create more of the private areas like the bathroom and some of the bedrooms. So we need an entryway into this space. So let's use the rectangle tool once again. So we'll click on the rectangle tool, click to make it active, and start by clicking here at this endpoint. So I'll click and release, move the cursor down, type in 48, 48, and then press enter. This will create a 48-inch by 48-inch entryway. Just below that, let's create an area to represent the bathroom. Starting at this endpoint here, click and release, move the cursor down and to the right. Be careful when you input the rectangle direction. If you over-exaggerate one direction, typically the longer direction is the value you're going to enter first. So right now, as I'm sort of moving in this longer vertical way versus a horizontal way, you'll see down in the measurement box, it doesn't matter. It always wants to use the longer distance first. I'm going to move down, type in 12 apostrophe, comma, 6 apostrophe, and then press return. If for some reason you did this backwards, let me undo. I began drawing this. It went this way and I typed 12 foot sign, comma, 6 foot sign, hit return. It draws it the incorrect way. That's okay. Just type it again in the reverse order. So 6 apostrophe, comma, 12 apostrophe, and then hit return. Now the other spaces in this house want to align to the bottom edge here and maybe want to go vertically as well to match some of the other geometry. To create guides in SketchUp, we can create these guidelines to help us reference other distances. To do that, click on the tape measure tool located right here. And then on this bottom edge right here, double click. A double click is going to create a guide on that edge, and it's going to run it horizontally. I'm going to close out the scene manager here by closing that panel just to see more of the model space. Next, let's create 2 vertical guides. Hovering over this midpoint here, click and release and move your cursor to the right, type in 10 apostrophe and press return. That's going to draw a guide 10 feet from the existing edge that we drew. And let's repeat that. But be careful, make sure you're not right here where it inferences from the original dot. That can sometimes create a glitch in SketchUp. So move your cursor just up a little bit, then click and release. Move your cursor over to the right, type in 10 feet again. So 10 apostrophe, and then press return. Now we have all the guides to create our rectangles. So let's click on the rectangle tool over here. Let's start by drawing the first bedroom. So we're going to start at this endpoint here, move down and to the right, and we're going to click right at that intersection of the 2 guides meeting. Let's draw the hallway going from this endpoint here down to this endpoint here, and then going from this top endpoint here. Let's bring that all the way down to the far intersection. When we're done with the rectangle tool, click on the select tool. That's usually just a good way to get out of any other tool. And you can see now we have an entryway, a hallway, a bedroom, another room, our bathroom, and then our main living, dining, kitchen area. With the rooms drawn, we now need to draw doors in order to enter the spaces. The door can be represented by drawing a line and an arc for the swing of the door or the direction that it's going. We'll make this as a component, which you'll be able to copy and use for other doors within the space. To get started, let's first just pan the model down a little bit. So I'm going to drag down. I'm going to look up into this area here. I'll scroll in a little bit as well, or zoom in, just to get closer. With the line tool, let's draw a line that is 36 inches long. So activate the line tool, click and release to start your line, and move your cursor up along the green axis. Type in 3, 6, and press enter. This will draw a 36-inch line. Now the line will want to continue drawing, so press escape to deactivate the line tool. That draws the door line itself, but now we need the arc to show the swing or the direction of the door. Click on the arc tool located right here. We're going to click on the first tool, which is the arc tool. The arc tool is 3 clicks. The first click is the starting point, which we'll put right here. The second click begins to define where the arc is going to start. So click again, and now move your cursor to the right. You can see the arc begin to create. As we get to 90 degrees here, we can go ahead and click and release to set the arc. And now we have a 2D symbol of a door. Since we have multiple of these in the model, it's important we make this as a component. A component is a cloned object or an identical object. So if you make changes to one of these in the model, it will affect all the other instances of that. The components are a great way to help us contain geometry, but also save time in that we only have to model one of these then. Take the select tool and drag a window around the line and the arc to pre-select it. Very carefully, hover over the edge and right click. If it deselects, like it did on mine here, that means we just need to make sure when we select that we're right clicking on the edge itself. We'll know we've done that correctly if you see all of these selection options. If you just see a small selection like this, that means you deselected it. So just make sure that the cursor is right on that edge. It's off just a little bit, it won't pre-select. We'll right click, then we'll select make component. When you make a component, you can name it. So let's call this door and then press OK. It will look like it adds an extra line or edges around it, but that is just a boundary box of a component. It's defining the limit or the boundary of that object. If you take the select tool and click off of the object, you'll see it just disappears. If you single click back on the object, you'll see that highlighting again. It's just a visual representation of the boundary of that object. With the door created, we can now move it into the model and then copy it to its corresponding locations. In order to move the door, we first want to make sure that the object is pre-selected. So single click on the door to pre-select it so that it highlights blue. Next, click on the Move tool located right here. When moving an object, make sure you're moving from a specific point. You don't want to just click anywhere arbitrarily on the object because then you can't snap and set it correctly. So let's make sure we're clicking from this corner point right here. So we'll click and release, begin our move. We'll move the object into our model. And let's place it in this 48-inch square for our entryway. And we can just eye this. It's okay if we're a little bit here or a little bit there. Just don't put it right on the edge. Just try to center it right about there. I'll pan the screen down again and even zoom out just a little bit to see more of the space. Because now we want to move and copy this over. So clicking on the Move tool once again, this time press Control on Windows or Option on a Mac. If you're unsure what you're using, just look down here in the status bar and you'll see that Control for me equals cycle to copy or to stamp or to move. We want to activate the stamp tool. So we're going to press Control twice. That way on the cursor, you see that little stamp icon to the top left of it. To begin stamping, click and release from the reference point that you want to copy or stamp from. So I'll click and release right here, bring the cursor down and click and release right here, making sure that it's clicking on the actual endpoint. I'll do that once here, and then over here, I will do it once again on this edge right here. It wants to continue stamping, so just press Escape to deactivate that, and that way your copies are set. Notice now the last copy that we made for this door needs to be rotated. I'll take the Select tool, and I'll just click off of it, and you can kind of see here how it's not in the correct orientation. Let's rotate it, and we could use the Rotate tool, but we could also, because it's a component, we can also use the Move tool. So let's pre-select it just so that it's active, and go ahead and click on the Move tool. The Move tool, as you hover over an object, has these 4 plus signs. And if you hover over one of those plus signs, you'll see a built-in rotate appears on your cursor. When you see that rotate active, go ahead and click. By clicking, it activates the rotate tool, and now I can dial this down till I get to here. Try to put your cursor somewhere along one of the ticks. That way it actually dials in. You can feel it click. After rotating it, take the Move tool and just move it so that it's up into the entryway of this hallway here. I'll then click on the Zoom tool and then click on Zoom Extents. That way I can see the rest of the model. I may pan the screen over as well, just to see that a little bit better. I'll then click on the Select tool and just click off of the model, clicking anywhere in the green model space. If we notice these 2 doors, this one here and this one here, the swing or the direction of the door isn't ideal for where and how we want to enter into the space. So these doors should be flipped or mirrored. We can flip or mirror in SketchUp by single clicking on the component itself, then right clicking on it and selecting Flip Along, and then select the desired axes that you want to flip along. So I'm going to select the components red. Majority of the times red will work and be the correct orientation that you want to flip along. But if it's not, you can simply undo and then you can flip along the other component direction. That's really just going to depend on how it was created, the orientation that you're flipping it along. So when in doubt, try red, and then you can always undo. Let's do the same thing for the entryway. Let's single click on it. We'll then right click and go to Flip Along and select Components Red. Now, when drawing floor plans, doors are typically represented with the edge being removed where the door enters into that room. So in order to do that, we actually need to draw a line break on the wall itself to create space to then remove the edge. We just take the eraser right now, it's going to erase the entire wall. We don't want that. So take the line tool and starting with the entryway, click on this endpoint here and then click here. Let's repeat that here. We'll click and release here and click there. We'll do that again here. So we'll click and release and click and release. And lastly over here, click, click. If we look closely, I take the select tool, you can see now it broke this line into several segments. So simply drawing a line on top of a line, it will break it into separate segments. Taking now the eraser tool, click on the top edge here, click on the door edge there, scroll out and keep erasing the other edges. And while we're here, we can actually erase this edge here. That way it opens this hallway into the foyer area. And then we can also open this hallway here. And let's say that this is an opening just into the living space. Notice that the faces remove in the model. Don't be alarmed by that. Typically, when you're creating in 3D, you want those surfaces, but in this 2D creation, the edges are more important than the faces. As long as we have the edges, we can always come back later and add those faces if we need them. Another tip is before creating the edges or the doors, make sure this is where you want the door to actually be. Because if you decide to move it now, notice that not only will you have to move the door, but you'll also have to move the wall edge over based off of where the segment is. So sometimes it's easier to just delete all of those edges and start over, or simply undo and just make sure before you create the door breaks, just to set your doors where you want them. Let's zoom extents one more time. And now we can move on to creating windows. Windows in a floor plan are represented as a rectangle with a line running through it. Like the door, let's create the window as a component and then move and copy it throughout the various rooms in the house. Let's begin with the rectangle tool located here. And somewhere down here in the green model space, just outside of the model, click and release to begin drawing a rectangle, move to the right, and then down just a little bit. Type in 36, 6 and press return. This will give us a 36-inch wide window, and 6 inches is tall enough to represent the depth of a window. Take the line tool now and draw a line from this midpoint here all the way over to the right to this midpoint here. Now we have our window symbol. Let's make it a component by taking the select tool, dragging a window around the object to pre-select it, and then right-click on the selection to check Make Component. In the Make a Component definition here, name this window, and then press OK. Scroll out just a little bit so we can see where we are in reference to the model. And let's move this in place first. So the first location we want is this bathroom area here, this room. Let's put one so it's centered on this edge. I'm going to zoom in a little bit closer, and then I'll take the Move tool, and I'm going to click starting at the midpoint in the window right here. Click to start that move, hover over this edge here until I find that blue or cyan colored dot right there. That will put that centered in that room. Now, similar to how we created and copied the doors, we can stamp these windows throughout the rest of the model. With the Move tool still active, depending on your operating system, activate the Stamp tool. So I'll press this twice to activate the Stamp tool with the Control key. And then make sure you click starting at the midpoint or center of the window. Click to start that copy. And notice, especially if you're using a mouse, you can still scroll in and out. You can use the navigation tools while you're still copying. This will help make it much easier to copy over longer distances. Click and release once here, and then again here. Move the cursor up again over to here. Once over here. And to the left over here. And then one more down here at this midpoint. When you're done stamping, simply press Escape to deactivate the tool. In addition to stamping, we can also move and copy from edges of the window. Let's take the navigational tool here and activate the pan tool. And I'm going to drag down to focus in on this bottom wall edge here. And let's say on this edge that I want a window located here and another window located here. And I want each window edge to be 24 inches off of the left edge or the right edge. So similarly to how we created guides for the rooms, we can use guides to help position the window. Let's activate the tape measure tool, click and release starting on the edge of the left vertical line. Move your cursor to the right, type in 2, 4, and press enter. This will create a guide 24 inches off of the left vertical edge. Let's repeat this over on the right side by click and releasing, moving our cursor to the left, and typing in 24 and pressing return. Now that we have the guides, let's take the select tool and single click on this nearest window. Activate the move tool and press on a PC control, on a Mac option. Now I want to copy from not the middle center point here, but the midpoint of the left side here. I'm going to click right here and copy this over and place it right at that intersection there. With that one copied, since this one is active, I'll press Control again. And this time I'll copy from, I need to zoom in a little bit more. I'll copy from this point right here and zoom out and zoom back in, copy it to this point right there. Let's do a zoom extents to see the rest of the model. We can take note that we have 3 windows on the vertical walls that need to be rotated. So similar to how we rotated the door here, let's take the move tool and rotate each window. But be careful with the move tool. The move tool wants to only be active on your previous tool. So press escape to deactivate the pre-selection so that now I can hover over this existing window. I can click and release, move my cursor down and click and release. And hover over this one, click and release, click and release. And same with this one, click, click. Now that we have the windows located in place, most of these windows can stay at 36 inches wide. But now we realize maybe this window we want to actually convert to something else. Let's say we want to represent this as a large opening or a large sliding door. We need to stretch this now to extend the dimensions of it. And we can stretch it using the scale tool. But first, zoom in to get much closer. You can pan the screen as well. And then clicking on the move tool, you can see that there's an additional tool here called the scale tool. So go ahead and click on the scale tool to make it active. Hover over the object that you want to scale and then click. You could also reselect with the select tool the object that you want to scale and then click on the scale tool. Now we want to scale this in just one direction. So be careful not to scale from the corners, but from the middle point here. And I'm going to click on this top point here to begin and activate the scale tool. But notice how it's only scaling it up in this direction. And that would be fine, but I want to retain the center of the object. So if I look down here, you can see it says control equals toggle scale about center. So whatever your modification tool is there, press that tool, so press control on a PC, option on a Mac, and now notice it's going to scale from the center. Now this is scaling based off of a scale factor, meaning 2 would be 2 times the size or 3 would be 3 times the size. Instead of telling SketchUp the scale factor, we want to tell it the actual dimension. So just type in 8 apostrophe and hit return. This will scale it so that it's actually 8 feet in length. So if we take the tape measure tool and measure, you can see from here to here is 8 feet in the distance. And that's what we want. We want a nice, big, wide opening here. And with the tape measure tool still active, let's zoom extents and click back on that tape measure tool. And let's space plan out the area for the kitchen, specifically creating the cabinets and the island in the top section of this model. Let's pan over, scroll in to get a little bit closer. And let's say we want a cabinet running along the top wall here. Typically cabinets are 24 inches deep. So with the tape measure tool, let's create a guide from this edge here, moving our cursor down, type in 2, 4, and press enter. Now for an island to begin, you need to leave some space. So we need to leave some space from where the cabinet ends and where the island begins. Taking the tape measure tool again, click and release on the guide that we just created, move the cursor down and type in 4, 2, and press enter. 42 inches is a pretty standard size to space between a cabinet and an island. It gives enough space for 2 people to be on that side of the kitchen. Let's create another guide here to represent the depth of the actual island itself. So we'll click and release here, move our cursor down and type in 4, 8 and press enter. That's going to give us the 48 inches to this edge right here. Next, we want to create these 2 vertical edges, and we can use those with guides to help us represent how much space we want to be able to walk around the model. So 2 feet isn't going to be enough for where those previous windows were. So let's actually draw 4 feet or 48 inches with the tape measure tool. So we'll click on the tape measure tool. We'll go from this edge here, go to the right, type in 48 and hit return. We'll go from this edge here, click and release, go to the left, type in 48 and hit return. Now that we have all the guides needed, we can simply use the rectangle tool and we can draw a rectangle from this endpoint here all the way over to this point here. And then from this point here all the way to here. Let's scroll out and orbit over to see the rest of the model. And we can note now that we no longer need the guides. And we can delete these guides in 2 different ways. One way is by actually taking the eraser and erasing the guide itself just by dragging over it. But this can be a little tricky in that you can accidentally erase some of your line work, some of your geometry. So we don't want to do that. A quicker way to erase all the guides is to click on the Search SketchUp toolbar and type in delete. Notice in the search the option for delete guides. Go ahead and click on that, and that will delete every guide in the model. With the walls, the doors, the windows, and now the cabinets and island in place, we now can fill up the room and program it with furniture. Like the 2D floor plan and windows we created, furniture symbols can be used to explore different room configurations. Rather than creating these from scratch, let's see how we can search the 3D warehouse or use existing 2D furniture symbols to place them within the model. So here's where our end goal will be. We're looking to place furniture to represent the living area, the dining area, a bathroom, a smaller bedroom, and then a master bedroom. Over on the right, we can search in the components icon. And within the 3D warehouse, we can search for 2D furniture and hit return. Now, depending how specific you're searching, you can find various different types of symbols to represent configurations and items that you want. For example, I could download just this object right here and then place it in the model by click and release. However, I'm going to undo that. For training purposes, instead of searching the warehouse, I've already provided a series of components in this template file that we can simply download. To find that, click on the home icon in the components library and notice the 2D furniture swatch here. Click and release on it to download it and now move it into the model space. I'm going to pan the screen down a little bit or zoom out, and I'm just going to place it somewhere up here in the model space. so that it's in the model. If you do not see this component available in the home icon, you can search for it in the 3D warehouse, searching for 2D furniture, SketchUp schools, and you should see a symbol similar to the one that is shown here. With the component in the file, this is actually a component inside of a component. So all of the subcomponents need to be able to be modified and moved. We can't see them right now because they're nested inside of this larger component. With your cursor over the object, right-click on it and select Explode. Notice two things that happen. One, in the model, you now see, we take the Select tool, we see that we can now click on each individual object to then move it. We also notice over here in our component palette that all of the other components are now available here to reference. So let's pan the screen down and let's have fun placing some components in the model. I'll start with some easy ones. Let's click and release on the bathroom and drop that to the model. We can also click on the corner to then reposition it. So since you didn't create these components yourself, sometimes it's difficult to know where the inserting position is going to be of that particular object. So what I suggest is just click on the desired component, move your cursor, and then you can begin to see where you're actually inserting from. So for the dining room table, it's in the center of the object. I scroll down further and click on the sofa with end tables. You'll see it's the bottom left-hand corner. And this is going to be model or component specific. So don't think what works here in this file is going to work for every component. Let's click on the sink and drop that here at the midpoint. Let's add the oven over here on the left side. Let's add the refrigerator, maybe right here. And then let's go into the private areas. So let's add this king size bed, add the full size bed, click and release, and click and release to bring it tighter. Let's drop in a closet, add a little bit tighter, and even a chase lounge here. Click and release to set that. Do not feel like you have to follow this exact floor plan layout for the furniture. Be creative. Make the rooms what you want. Search the 3D warehouse for some other items. This is just a template to get you started. You can always change the layout and configuration of it to meet the design need that you want. To finish up the placement of a few objects, let's click on this component number 2, which simply is a bar stool that just wasn't named. So sometimes when users create components or subcomponents, they just aren't named. And then the other thing that we can do is once we have furniture in the model, we can take the Select tool and select existing lines, and we can move those. So if we realize we now need less cabinet space, we can move that line over, and then we can take our refrigerator and move that over as well to give some space for our entry. You can also rotate objects. So I can select the chase lounge. You can click on the move tool, hover over it, and click on that plus sign to angle this 45 degrees and then move it down just a little bit. Let's zoom out once more, and we now have all of these duplicate items up here. So once they're in the model, we don't need them anymore up top here. So take the Select tool and drag a window around the selection of those objects, and then press the Delete key on your keyboard. We're almost finished now. A good way to wrap up would be to label the rooms, identify them. And in order to add labels, we need to use the 3D text tool. You can find the 3D text tool under the drawing tools here and in the 3D text right here, which is the A icon. Go ahead and click on that. And I'm going to do this in all caps. I'm going to type the word kitchen in all capitals. And the only other things that I'm going to change here is I'm going to uncheck text extrusion. So I don't need this to be a dimensional or extruded letter. I can just have it be flat in 2D like the rest of our model. Go ahead and press OK, and then move your cursor to place the text in the model. Let's repeat this again. So we'll click on the drawing tools here, then click on the 3D text tool. Let's type in living and click OK. Place our living room over here. And let's do this again. Click on the drawing tool, click on 3D text. Let's type in bath and click OK. Put this in the bathroom. And we'll just continue the process. Type in bedroom or whatever you've labeled these other rooms as. Click OK. Place it. And I could either move and copy this, or I can click on this again and press OK. And then click and release to set it. One other thing that we can do here to just make the model look a little bit nicer is, instead of having this be sort of an outline text for the labels, let's have it be more of like a solid fill. So click on the paint bucket located right here. And click on this black color swatch right here. That's going to activate that material. And now I'm going to click on the text of each label. And this can be a little tricky. You might need to zoom in just a little bit. Just make sure that the bucket, so that paint, where the paint is spilling out, make sure that's on an actual object. If it's not going to apply it. So make sure it's right on that point there. I'll click on the select tool just to click off of any existing object. And now we're pretty close to finalizing this. There's just a few more steps we need to finish in order to be able to export this out as a 2D floor plan. The first is, we typically don't print this on a green background. Now, seeing this on a green background right now for the default template is nice in that it allows us to see what is a fill and what is not. But this isn't what we'd want to export. So over on the right, click on the Styles panel, and you'll notice we're in what's referred to as the landscape architecture style. I'm going to click on Default Styles and then select the Shaded with Texture style. Shaded with Texture is a nice style that shows the background white, and it creates a nice, clean, crisp line work. We don't have those really heavy profile edges. And you can see now it looks more like a true 2D drawing. While we're here, let's also orbit. You can kind of notice and see that Catherine is still in our model, and we don't need her in the model anymore. So let's just take the select tool and press delete. To export this out as a 2D view, we need to set our view, and we also need to turn off the axes so that it's not visible. Let's turn the axes off first. So up in the search SketchUp toolbar, I'm going to type in the word axes, and where it says view axes, let's just click on that slider. That's going to turn it off from the model. Next, over in the scenes manager, let's click on the top view here. And that's going to bring us to a nice clean top view. We can then click and close the side panel. Finally, let's save the model. So let's go up to the menu, up in the top, click Save As. I'm going to save it in my SketchUp folder that I've previously created, or you can create your own folder. And I'm just going to call this Lesson 1 Finished, and click Save. You, of course, can name this whatever you want for your specific need. So that simply saves the SketchUp file so that we can get back into it. What if we wanted to just save a view that we have here? One way we can do that is by clicking on the menu and clicking Print. And now, based off of our paper size, we can save this as a PDF that is very easy to print out or attach to an email and be viewable from any web browser. So just go ahead and click Print to PDF, click OK, and it will ask to save a file location for this particular file. And you can click Save. Congratulations. Thank you for following along with this SketchUp for Schools lesson. You can now play around with creating your own floor plans using the skills learned in this lesson. Remember that this lesson is part 1 of a 3-part series of Design Your Dream Home. You can move on to part 2, which is turning 2D into 3D, where we'll create a 3D exterior file. And then in part 3, we will print out that 3D file as a paper cutout. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed this lesson.